So welcome, our beloved, remarkable brother Ken. We so appreciate your consistent leadership and solidarity. And as always at SETC, we begin all things by acknowledging our creator, by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation, all those whose bones lie at the bottom of the transatlantic, all those who said freedom or death. We acknowledge all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So Ken, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers and share a bit about your remarkable work?
Thank you so much, Victor. It's good to be here. A very good afternoon to you all. Greetings from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Atlantic Canada, for those of you who might not know where that is. My name is Kenneth Oguzie, and I am the President CEO of Africa-Canada Trade Investment Ventures. So as the name sounds, what we really do, we sort of facilitate, trade, business, investment between Africa and Canada. As a way really of sort of building that sort of relationships between the continent where I come from, Nigeria specifically, and of course Canada, a place which I've come to call home for the last 10 years or so. So really we sort of build that bridge. We are like facilitators, we are like connectors. We bring people together and we sort of create those avenues where people can sort of share their ideas, share their business, prospects, and at the end of the day, strengthen those bonds or relationships, which cuts across transatlantic. And of course, there's been a lot of historical connections as well. So in a nutshell, that's what we sort of do. And that's what we've been doing at least for the last 7 to 8 years.
That's truly remarkable, brother. I appreciate your visionary leadership and the considerable work that you're doing on behalf of so many. Thank you so much. So my next question is, what inspires you right now? What has you curious in your work?
So for me, I just sort of would like to take it back to how this vision started, and then I sort of build upon that so that we can see where my inspiration comes from. So, when you think about, Canada and Africa, when I first moved here, I started doing a lot of work around speaking to individuals and stakeholders to understand what their thoughts around Africa was. And everything I heard was around aid. Africa is like where we send aid, people are suffering, people are dying. And I'm like, okay, this narrative is not what it should be. This continent is bigger than that. There's a lot of stuff. Of course, the first hurdle was really educating people that Africa is not a country, it's a continent. So that was part of how we had to do sort of those education and sensitization. But then I looked at it and said, listen, someone has to sort of step up and change this narrative. And, it has to start from somewhere. And at this point in time, I am here in Nova Scotia. Very important place when you think about the connections between Sierra Leone and Nova Scotia, talking about the Maroons and, how people move from here, Liberia, all those whole connections. So there's no better place really to be situated and start this work. So we then sort of started building upon that and saying, how can we work whereby in the next couple of years, we can look back and say there's been a lot of traction and we have been able to sort of strengthen that relationship beyond aid, but trade, because that's what I think the continent really would go a long way in terms of building the continent. And then, of course, I also looked at the fact that we had a lot of people from the African diaspora living in Canada till date, right? And in Nova Scotia. So how do you sort of bring all these stakeholders who come with a lot of skills and experience, who are constantly contributing to the community as a whole, but then a lot of things is happening in silos, right? So that's how we sort of put this structure together, leverage that. And, as of today, we've had a lot of milestones around businesses connecting between Canada and Africa. We've had a lot of milestones around investments, even coming from Africa into Canada, which is something typically most people don't know. People sometimes think about it from one way because there's that whole economic mindset where you might feel like, okay, one side is much more economically strong than the other part. But the narrative is that that's not what it is. It's a sectoral thing. It depends on the sector you're talking about. There are a lot of sectors that there's a lot of advancement in Africa beyond what you even see in Canada, and vice versa. So for me, my inspiration today lies in the fact that, when we hear those success stories, when we hear individuals who say, oh, listen, I didn't know about some of this, and now I'm engaging with people in Africa or businesses. Or even the most recent one where, I had someone who, a part of a business delegation, we're supposed to take to Africa, part of what we do. And this individual went to the doctor and said, hey, I'm going on a trip, to Africa. And the doctor was like, oh, don't go there. It's horrible. I've heard a lot of terrible stuff. Anyways, this person calls me up and we speak about it. And I said, are you committed to doing this? He said, yes, I'm going to do it. And then we went to Africa, and then, great business things, a lot of opportunities. And now this person is asking me, when are we doing this? Can we do this before the end of the year again? So those are huge inspirations for me. That's sort of the thing that puts a smile on my face, gladdens my heart, and really makes me feel like I'm impacting the community I live in, and of course, supporting my country and the continent which I come from. So that's sort of my, that's what I would respond to that, Victor.
Indeed, indeed. That doctor is odd.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure his laptop and his electric car, the minerals come from the same continents, he said. But as our ancestor Sajafo Kwame Nkrumah said, forward ever, backward never. So we'll leave it alone. So my next question is, what challenges and barriers do you face in your work? And what are some of the approaches you and your colleagues are taking to overcome these challenges and barriers?
So I probably maybe alluded to them, but I'll probably go into details. I think there's a lot of stereotypes and biases. Thinking about Africa, the continent, people have been fed with all this negative news from the media. And of course, there's also the piece we can allude to racism as well, because Africa is pretty much a Black continent, and we know how, brothers across the world, there's still a lot of short-minded people, narrow-minded people who just sort of, create all these labels. And of course, there are a lot of amazing people as well, of course, like every other place. But I think those stereotypes and biases has been a challenge. A lot of individuals, the only news or the only information they have about the African continent is negative. You chat to them about opportunities, and you sort of want to pick their brains that, what do you know about Africa? And they say, oh, I know there's a couple of wars going on. I'm like, is that all? Do you realize this continent, there's this thing here, this is there, this is there, and then their minds start opening up. So sort of dealing with some of those stereotypes and biases, that has been a huge challenge. And also, even at the policy level, we're still doing a lot of work with Canadian stakeholders, government, because, I dare to say that Africa has not really been much of their interest for reasons best known to them, because for me, I still struggle to understand how this continent probably has the youngest population. So this is set to become the next big thing. So really, you should be focusing on where opportunity is going, not where opportunity is. And where else is it going? Is Africa. So even the challenge of convincing some of the policymakers in government at various levels to really up their game to move this to like the level A in terms of priority continents or countries, that's been another challenge. But you know what, for us, the approach we've sort of adopted around dealing with those challenges is, listen, you learn to meet people where they are, and education really helps in terms of bringing people from their ignorance. Yes, we can say it's not our responsibility to educate people. People should educate themselves. But then you need to realize that even sourcing for information in the right spaces is a skill on its own. So sometimes we've had to find ways to, meet people where they are, manage our expectations really, and find ways to sort of provide them with those resources and assets which can really change their mindsets and really sort of heighten their interest in terms of dealing with the continent or doing business with the continent. And another thing too, which I found out, was that there was a lot of times which we also overestimated stakeholders' knowledge. So you would meet people in top places and you go into conversations, and then you're thinking they have the baseline information, but they don't. So, that was a lesson learned whereby you go in, you spend the first few minutes figuring out where they are before you sort of tailor your communication or your engagement based on where they are, because we've had some mind-blowing responses from people you would expect better, even up to government level. So, those challenges has been there, and this has typically been like our go-to in terms of, being able to navigate those challenges and, being able to come up with solutions, which seems to be working for now. So, yeah.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for all that context, brother, and your candor. I appreciate your
Mm-hmm.
leadership as always. So, how do you feel about the future of relations between Canada and Africa as a continent? We have Global Affairs Canada, we have EDC, Export Development Canada. There's a lot of international frameworks and models that Canada has relationships with in terms of continents. How do you feel the future of the relationship between Canada and the continent of Africa?
Well, I mean, I'm African, and we work with a lot of optimism, and we're very positive-minded people, and of course, the whole Black race, actually, I would say. So of course, I share a lot of optimism. I feel things would happen in the right way, or things would go progressive around that Canada-Africa trade relations. Some of the organizations you just mentioned, we have engaged with them, both at the personal level and of course at the organizational level. It's been mixed. We've had individuals, because organizations are made up of people comprise organizations. So we've had individuals who have been very progressive and really open, and we've also encountered some resistance, which different reasons. Of course, one of the biggest ones has always been when you work with policymakers or people at certain levels, it all has to tie into the appetite at the federal level. So if the country doesn't prioritize certain markets from a business standpoint, it's hard really to sort of get the sort of interest or traction that you want. So, however, there's been a lot of this, discussion. Shout out to, a lot of other stakeholders, individuals across Canada who are doing similar work like we do. And, we've sort of all been putting pressure from different angles. And even if you look at the present economic landscape, Victor, you can see, looking at things like China relations, which you can say is not really the way it used to be. And you look at Europe as a whole, Europe is a market, but hey, you can't compare, Europe to Africa in terms of the size of the market. So the logical destination really has to be Africa. Now, Africa is, of course, very complex in terms of you have all the extremes from North Africa to West Africa, East Africa. It's all, different cultures. However, there's a lot of commonalities in terms of progressive, hardworking people and people who are typically open to businesses and opportunities. So in a nutshell, I am very optimistic. I think we will see more traction as the year goes by. I manage my expectation by not expecting it to happen like immediate, like overnight. However, I think we are in the right direction. I think, individual stakeholders like yourself and every other person within the community, we all just need to keep, singing the same song, on the same note, the same key, that this is the continent, and this continent is blessed with a lot of things, not just mineral resources, but human resources. And there's a lot of benefits mutually Canada can actually get as well by, strengthening the engagement, strengthening the relationships beyond business as well, even the cultural piece, because you see, like I said earlier, you see a lot of people from the diaspora coming with these amazing skills. So how much are you tapping into them as ambassadors to really help build and strengthen those relationships? So that would typically be my message. And this would actually share, this also sort of summarizes what I believe or what I strongly feel about the future.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for once again your leadership. I know that we're in the final year of the UN Decade for People of African Descent, and I'm obviously optimistic as well, based off of the permanent forum that's been developed. but I feel there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of relationships, primarily because of the extractive nature in terms of mining companies and a lot of interest from the West on the continent of Africa that a lot of times don't benefit people on the ground in Africa or the global African diaspora. So once again, I appreciate your remarkable leadership, your strength, and all that you do for so many. So my last question, beloved brother, do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action for our listeners and our viewers?
Well, so first of all, I like to just comment on the piece on extraction and minerals, because the mining thing has been very controversial, and honestly, I think there needs to be more work in terms of ensuring there's a lot of ethics around how that is done. Of course, organizations like us, we push really against just raw materials. We think there should be a lot of value added more on the continent, because that's the way you can grow those economies and create more value and put more money in the pockets of those, those in the mining industry and all of those pieces, especially those coming from those communities where they don't have a lot. So I think organizations really should just look beyond that and also figure out what are some of the ways they can add value, to that chain and really support the origin of some of these minerals, which you and I, like you talked about mobile phones, our cars, and all of this, we all depend on or we utilize them, but we all need to step up to see how can we ensure there is more socially responsible business conduct, But my closing thoughts really would be to say, Africa is open for business. The community is growing. And I think we need to realize that we have a lot in common than we think. Let's take time to educate ourselves. Let's continue to, strengthen all the bonds that we share. And of course, for the Black people who live across, globally, it's interesting how, you spend time and you meet Black people from different parts of the world and you see so much similarities and you wonder, like, this is like, oh, you're in the Caribbean or we're all the way in Africa, but we do these things in your homes and you're asking how, but that shows you that distance doesn't separate that bond, and those bonds are there regardless of geography or regardless of how long we seem to be separated. So my message just remains: we stay steadfast, we stay committed to the work, we stay committed to the cause, and at the end of the day, hopefully as time progresses, Africa will continue to rise, Canada will rise, of course, and of course the Black race collectively, we can grow, we stay unified, and hopefully we achieve our goals and the potentials we set out to do.
Ashe, my brother. Thank you so much for your remarkable leadership. You make our ancestors proud. I know that you made notes of the mining situation across the continent. And a lot of times I think about one of our brothers. He shared one time that Manhattan, the area of Manhattan, was purchased for something like $17, like something ridiculous, because the peoples on the land did not conceptualize the land as something that people could own. To them, it was almost like, yeah, sure, you want to buy the air for $15, Sometimes I think about how our ancestors stewarded the lands and the waters, and the approach that we may eventually have to take in terms of that same level of vigilance and tenacity around stewarding land and water on the continent. And literally having that same sentiment that's our ancestors whose bones lie at the bottom of the transatlantic, freedom or death. This isn't our land, it's not your land. The land is a Sasia. Yeah. So I give thanks for all that you do for so many, beloved brother. And as always, at SETC, we close the way we began, by acknowledging our creator, by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassionate compensation. We acknowledge all those whose bones lie at the bottom of the transatlantic, all those who said freedom or death. We acknowledge all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we share, build, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Thank you so much, Ken, for all that you do for so many.
Thank you so much, Victor, and congratulations on everything you do. I know the impact. We continue to support individuals like yourself who are really doing a lot, contribute to the community, and keep doing it. And we see you, and we're always here for you. So thank you, Victor.
Thank you, my brother.
Absolutely.